nasty.
When you're buying commercial property, you're probably likely not going to get a very good deal on lending unless you're 30 or plus percent down.
Okay.
And then the bank's going to want to see if your business is buying it, they're going to want to see all your paperwork. I see high ROIs on people who own property for a long time, or new construction places where people don't have debt. Well, if you bought a property 20 years ago, you're going to have a ton of equity in the property, probably have the building paid off.
Yeah.
If you're a good landlord, now you're collecting a lot of rent and you don't have a lot of debt on the property.
Welcome back, and we are here for another episode of the Nasty Truth Podcast with my friend Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor is a commercial real estate extraordinaire. Michael Taylor has been in the industry for a couple decades now, and he started off as a general contractor, and then he went into real estate development, and he really got the wide breadth of what it means to work in the real estate industry. Everything from being an agent to a commercial broker to doing general contracting work. He's able to look at a project differently than most real estate agents. He knows what it costs to build a home. He knows what the problems with homes are. He knows how to manage huge projects. So when he goes to sell places or help his clients buy commercial properties, he's able to give them a breadth of knowledge that is not really available to them with any other person. He's going to break down today what it means to buy a commercial property, what it means to invest in a commercial property, and some terms that you might hear such as triple net within that industry. If you're interested in potentially buying a commercial place or just learning about commercial real estate, this is going to be a great podcast for you to start off at and for you to really just get a little bit of an intro. So if you're interested, pay attention. We're going to get started right now. So hello and welcome to another episode of the Nasty Truth Podcast. Today we have one of my close friends, Mr. Michael Taylor. Mr. Taylor is here. He is a commercial real estate extraordinaire. We're going to be diving deep into what Michael does. You know, commercial real estate is completely different than residential real estate. A lot of people might hear this term. They don't really know what it means, right? So we're going to have Michael kind of explain to you what that means. Now, if you don't know about Michael Taylor works for RE/MAX TerraSol, correct?
Correct, yep.
RE/MAX TerraSol is a branch of RE/MAX where they handle commercial real estate primarily. And Michael has a lot of experience in the commercial space. He also was a general contractor. Just fun fact, he also was a fireman back in the day, so all you lovely ladies out there, you know, he's the guy. And I wanted to basically introduce this lovely guest. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Joe, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Great venue. Excited to talk to you and learn, have you guys learn a little bit more about me, commercial real estate. RE/MAX TerraSol, they do a lot of residential real estate. I'm primarily the commercial guy through their brand, but RE/MAX Commercial is a huge worldwide brand.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started and let's talk about what is the difference really between commercial real estate versus residential real estate? And can you explain what those differences are?
Absolutely. So it's a very easy distinction. Residential is 1 to 4 units. That's what residential is. Anything other than that is considered commercial. So to name a few, we have land, you can do hotels, there's leasing, tenant placement, multifamily properties, they have warehouse properties. Development deals can fall under the commercial category depending on if they're 1 to 4 units or less, it's maybe a residential deal. Above that's a commercial development deal. Those are just some of the topics.
So can I ask you, what do you exactly mean by a unit, right? So you said like units, does that mean like a place that people can rent, like maybe like an apartment building, or what exactly defines a unit, like when you say 1 to 4 of them?
So basically be an address. So if you lived on 123 Main Street, unit number 1, and there's 4 units in that fourplex,
Okay.
that unit, 4 units, one of those units, number A or number 1, that would be a unit. So it's basically an address.
Okay.
So each address is its own unit.
Okay, so if we have more than 4 units, that would now categorize it from residential to commercial.
Correct.
Okay, and is there like different zoning within a city or within a different landscape that would make something commercial versus residential, or can you have a commercial building pretty much anywhere?
No, every city's got a specific plan, and it highlights and colors the entire town with how they want the town to be laid out.
Okay.
So if you're living in Laguna Niguel up in Marina Hills, there's very few multifamily properties up there. They have duplexes. They're not considered duplexes. They're considered single-family attached units.
Okay.
But they're just attached, but they're still a single-family unit. The city definitely has to approve it, and you have to be in that plan. Now, if you want to do let's say there's a multifamily area that's commercial and you want to do a multifamily unit, but you wanted a commercial Starbucks or a phone store or a Subway or something underneath it, then that would be considered a mixed use development.
Okay.
And you'd have to go to the city and get it rezoned for that.
Okay, and
there's
there's
not part of the specific plan. It's not easy to do that.
Okay.
If you can provide and prove the best use for that area is this, and you can break it down for them, it'd be a lot easier to do it.
So I want to kind of dive into a little bit of your history, right? So let's talk about you being a general contractor, right? How did that play really well into your field now, which is commercial real estate, right? What did you learn from your time as a contractor, and how did it translate into this position?
When I was a contractor, I started actually out in Colorado in the early 2000s. It was very easy to get a loan. So I would close on a property. I would negotiate in the deal that I would get money back at closing. So I'd use that money to fix up the property, and then I would resell it.
Okay.
So I did a lot of those, and I did like flips, and then I did some development, single family homes, and then I went into some multifamily stuff. Ended up with a few properties I decided to keep and just rent those. But going through that whole process of entitlement, building, the plans, finding, I was generally contracting pretty much everything myself, but picking all the subs, I couldn't do everything myself. So I do all the subs and everything like that. So I learned a lot about what it takes from start to finish to buy a piece of land, build it, and then sell it. I did that for 5 years in Colorado and learned quite a bit doing that. So when the market changed and I had properties I couldn't sell because the market tanked in 6 and 7 and 8, I moved out to California, back out to California because I grew up out here, and I got my contractor's license. People thought I was a little nutty to get my contractor's license, but you gotta chase the market. And I saw that there's literally a million foreclosed properties in California that the banks had no idea what to do with them or how to manage, maintain, fix, and sell those things. So I got contracts with preservation companies and banks to work on those properties, and over a 5-year span.
Oh wow! So you had like a full team working for you. And earlier you mentioned that you would manage subs. So what exactly is a sub? Is that a subcontractor?
Yeah, it's a subcontractor. So I'm a general contractor, so I can do anything on a property, or I can hire another licensed professional who specializes in electrical. So that's probably one thing I didn't really like to do a whole lot was electrical. So I'd always hire that out. I'd sub it out is what they call it.
Got it. So you're almost like, another word for it might be like a foreman of a job, right? You're like kind of keeping track of everybody, and you'll be managing people with their specific specialties.
Right.
What was your specific specialty in that field? Or did you have a team that had a specific specialty?
My specialty was going out and finding the deals.
Okay.
Somebody has to be the rainmaker and go out and get the contracts with the banks, make sure I was in the right zip codes, make sure I had teams to work in those zip codes and do that, and then make sure those teams were getting those properties done correctly.
Yeah.
One of the hard things in that whole scene was how do you document that everything was getting done, right? So it's all photo documented. So after the job was done or during the job, I needed draws, or depending on the size of the job, I had to show before, during, and after pictures that justified my bid.
So how did you end up winning those bids? Like, was it something where you schmoozed the bank owners or like the representatives there? Or how did you end up getting that? Because I bet at that time it was extremely competitive to get those deals.
Well, actually, there's so many people went out of business in the contracting field at that time. I got in at the right time early on, that once I got in and I could prove myself that I was doing a good jobs, they were just sending me jobs.
Got it.
They're calling me up. They're like, hey, do you know anybody in Arizona? And I'm like, I'll find somebody, send me the work. And I'd start a crew in Arizona. I started one in Texas, started one in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I would do, all kinds of stuff out there for those guys. All photo documented, so I didn't need to be out there.
Okay, got
I did
it.
150 homes in Ohio or Oklahoma, and I never even went there once.
Got it. Where was your favorite area to work in, or what would be the reason that it was the favorite area?
Favorite area would be a close area because we did a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
I'd be up in LA, Palm Springs, and San Diego. Super stressful, very expensive, and hard, super hard. Some of the more memorable, maybe, jobs were going into some of the bad areas, South Central, Compton. There's some Linwood places, Long Beach. Had some pretty tore up properties where I had to have police escorts come in there and make sure the place was cleaned up, and
Oh, wow.
or the people weren't in there anymore.
Okay.
Some sad situations too with homeless people living in these properties for multiple years, and that's just where they lived. And
Yeah.
we come in there, and the properties were so bad we had to demo them.
Oh, wow.
So I tried to help these guys find places and
Yeah,
some
I'm
things
sure
like
it's very
that
tough.
too.
Yeah,
So
it's
you know,
emotionally probably a lot having to deal with some of those people that had to get kicked out, right? And this was, you're saying for you, the best timing was actually at a recession, right? Because of all the foreclosures, and you were able to come in and fix these properties for them.
Yeah, no, I was as busy as I have ever been during that time.
Got it. And
Which I was very fortunate.
Did the banks pay for the repairs, or was this something that you would like pay for out of pocket, and you would make a commission with them when it came to the general contracting?
No, they would hire me to do whatever scope of work. The bank would send out a realtor or an appraiser to go look at a property.
Okay.
And they would say, hey, this property, it's been vandalized, the AC's gone, the copper's taken, you know, it's been beat up, it's overgrown, the city's putting violations on the property because it's obviously vacant.
Yeah.
So then they would be like, okay, here's, you know, Mike, he's coming in these zip codes, let's send him out there to give us a bid. So I'd be running out doing bids on these properties based off of their need and my professional opinion on what it would take to get the violations removed, get this property in a secure state that maybe a realtor could come in and put a for sale sign on and get somebody to pick this thing up.
Okay, got it.
So that's basically how it starts. And then I go in there with my bid and I'd be like, you have to do this, this, and this. There's mold, and I'd find all kinds of things in there, and I'd be like, you know, this is what needs to be done. And we go back and forth. They'd try to do the least, I'd try to do the most.
Yeah.
You know, because I wanted to work, I wanted the property to be solid. And,
Yeah. It's just like an insurance company, right? They want to do the absolute minimum. They don't want to do what's necessary for the home to rehab it perfectly. And you're trying to do what's good for the people that are going to eventually come in and buy the house.
Right, pretty similar. Yeah. The hard part for the banks was some properties, some of the cities would put violations on the home to light the fire under the bank to say, hey, here's a $20,000 violation, and this is going to double in 3 months if you don't come out here and do this fix this property up.
Got it.
Make it, you know, the neighborhoods, the vagrants, the rats, everything that comes along with a distressed property like that.
Yeah.
So I would go and talk to the cities when I'm pulling permits, and I would get a lot of these violations removed or significantly reduced. And I was the only one doing that.
Yeah.
So I was became a favorite of a lot of the banks.
Yeah, you would almost mitigate for them instead of trying to cut corners. You do it the right way.
Right. I talk to the inspectors and be like, hey, let's remove this violation. I'll be working on this property this week. I already have the work order. And, you know, a lot of times they would be okay with it.
Yeah.
Their ultimate goal was to get these properties, you know, back on the market and have, you know, tax-paying citizens live in them. That's what the city wanted.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so you came to a lot of these homes, most of them were in foreclosure. What is some of the craziest shit you ever saw when you came to these houses, right? Were they just in complete disarray? Were they like disgusting? Was there like homeless people doing drugs in there? Like, or am I just kind of listing all the things that you saw?
That times 10. Like the worst you could imagine are some of the things. There was, you know, obvious crack houses. I've saw places where I opened up the front door and I looked up and I'm like, there's no roof on this house.
Oh my God.
And there's mushrooms the size of elephant ears growing inside the property from the water damage and the crazy. It was just like, I'm not going in there. This is
How does it even get to that point? Is it just the city ignores it, or like what happens there?
I mean, the city can't really go into the proproperties and start fixing stuff up.
Got it.
Like, who owns it? I'm not going to go do stuff in here to get paid.
Okay.
I'm going to go put a lien on the property in the tax records.
Yeah.
And the owner's going to get an overnight letter saying, hey, a lien's been placed on your property, and, you know, that starts lighting fires under banks because they're like, oh, this is costing me more now. Not only is it foreclosed upon or, you know, short sale, these guys bailed.
Yeah.
Now we're getting all this, you know, fines from the cities.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's been homeless people, just 15 of them living in there for decades with no plumbing. So you could just imagine what.
So is it like basically the city is like getting these people kicked out? Like, who owns these homes that it gets to the point where there's 15 homeless people living in their house?
Well, when a bank owns, like a Wells Fargo, they own, you know, 300,000 homes in LA that have been foreclosed upon, vacant, or in some cases they're like, we haven't received a payment on this loan for 6 months, and we don't know what's going on with the property. And so then the homeless vagrants and people like to cause problems, they just find these properties because they're out and about. Yeah. And they're like, oh, nobody's here. I'm going to sleep here tonight. And then it turns into 2 nights and a week and a month, and then they tell their friends, and then, you know, they're cooking food in their little sterno grills inside.
Oh my God.
it's really bad in some cases.
This is wild. I had no idea that it was this much of like almost like a little pandemic, right? Like people don't even know that it's going on, and people just move in, and I'm sure the neighbors aren't happy about it, right? They see that these people move in and they're causing problems. That's crazy. And then you said some of the houses you've even seen without roofs before. How does that even happen, right?
The property, there's something wrong with the roof, so it starts leaking.
Yeah.
And you get those heavy rains. There's a couple of years where we had some heavy rains, and people go in there and they rip the drywall out and they steal copper and wire, and some of these homeless people are like knocking out 2x4s to make fires and stuff like that, and then things start falling and collapsing, and
wild.
When pools of water sit outside your property and it's not draining correctly, it starts affecting the foundation. The property tilts and things crack and fall apart. And honestly, a vacant house, you'd think it would just sit there. Yeah. But it actually falls apart way quicker than you think it would when there's not somebody in there dusting and cleaning and making sure that AC's on or running, or the heat. It's all that hot and cold, and animals get in there. Yeah. I mean, I've seen properties where the guys had like 6 or 8 Rottweilers in there that they're breeding.
Jesus.
And then they also use the dogs to keep them away from their stashes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I go there, I'm like, 6 Rottweilers? No, I'm out.
Yeah, no, I'm not going anywhere near this house. I don't care how much they're paying me. I'm not going to be cleaning this out. And I'm sure you've called like the city to come and clean it up before too, right?
Yeah, and some of my guys have rescued some of like the emaciated puppies, Rottweiler rescues, or the
shelters or wherever somebody will take them. So you basically have seen these homes, you've seen them in completely destroyed states, right? And you've really gotten familiar with, I'm guessing, how these properties can get into disarray, right? So would you say that because you've had so much experience with these homes in complete a destroyed state, that you now know what homes are a good investment, right? You know which areas might be good, what areas would be good to put your money in, or potentially what areas might not be good to put your money in?
Yeah, no, it's helped me out a lot. And talking to clients about, the strength of the area, basically. And if I buy this place and I rehab it, am I going to be losing money in the long run? Is it going to benefit me? Is it a flip potential? What if I add square footage? Am I allowed to add square footage? Yeah. What's going to be built around the corner? Like those vacant lots, down on the street, what's going to go in there? There's going to be gas stations. I don't want to live by a gas station. So I can navigate through the city. I understand all the codes and lot sizes versus footprints and how much you can have on the property. If you go like in Newport Beach, if you go over 3,000 square feet, especially over in the flower streets, you have to have a 3-car garage. Yeah. So 3,500 square feet. So people are building up 3,400 square foot homes, right? The biggest they can get with a two-car garage, because they can't there's just not enough room on these lots because they're so small. Postage stamps. So I can talk to a lot of people about a lot of that stuff. And my experience in the past has really benefited me. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the knowledge that you must have gained just from dealing with the city, right? You're really seeing how cities manage things, how they set up these codes, how they set up these regulations. And I'm sure that experience alone will allow you to, help your customer and kind of get through the process, make sure that they're not messing up any coding, and that they're really able to kind of get their foot in the door and get the right investments, right? Yeah, it's all about connecting them with the right people. We'll talk to the city planner who's in charge of that area, with the right contractor who, make sure they're building within their budget and in the size like that too. It's super important. But obviously you got to start with, the piece of property and what you're allowed to build there. Got it. Once you know what you're allowed to build there, then you can take the steps with the city and start going through that process if that's something they want to do. And that goes with commercial and residential. Okay, so let's talk about now, let's say somebody's interested in buying a commercial property, right? Like, let's talk about somebody's thinking about doing an investment, right? Because it seems that most of the time for commercial, it's either going to be for their own personal business or it's an investment a lot of the time, whether it's a hotel or a business that they want to open up. What are the things that they need to be thinking about before they come to a commercial real estate broker to get assistance with going down this road? Like, do they need a certain amount of money? I know we're in California, which is a huge expensive market, right? But what are some things that they need to start thinking about before they come to you to start this process? Well, I mean, obviously they have to have a thriving, successful business. And a lot of these people come to me with their, hey, we were growing and we want a bigger place, or hey, we need to downsize because we don't need all of this space. So they need to know that type of stuff. When you're buying commercial property, you can, but you're probably likely not going to get a very good deal on lending unless you're 30 or plus % down. Okay. And then the bank's going to want to see if your business is buying it. They're going to want to see all your paperwork, see how long have you been in business, what's your expenses, how much you gross, how much you pay yourself, what type of business it is.
Yeah.
Right? Do you need a drive-through? You can't have a drive-through everywhere.
Got
The
it.
city won't allow it. So there's a lot of different things that I need to talk with them about what they're actually going to need. And then, if they're zip code or area specific, then we can start, nailing down on different areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so you said that they typically have to put 20-30% down. I know that in normal real estate, you can go as low as 3%. What is the typical amount of money that people have to put down on these properties before they can make a purchase?
I mean, if you're 30% down on $1 million, you're $300,000 down.
Yeah.
And that's just your basic down payment.
Okay. And is 30% typically needed, or is it 20 or 10%?
In commercial, you're typically going to want to come in with 30%. I'm sure there's products out there, but then it kind of goes to the hard money scenario.
Yeah.
And nobody wants a 7, 8, 9 plus 10 interest rate. I mean, maybe if it's short term and they're making a bunch of money, they could refinance it when they have more money to put down.
Yeah.
But I mean, somebody with a business who wants to be in an area, be a staple in the area, they need to come in with 30 or more % down.
Okay.
To get a decent rate so they can make money and thrive in business.
And then are the rates pretty much the same as residential, or is commercial higher? What is
Commercial
it?
is going to be higher because there's more risk for the bank to take in.
Like how much higher though?
You'd probably be lucky to get in there for 4%.
Okay.
Like right now, rates are 2.5% for highly qualified. So highly qualified commercial buyer, you're going to be 4%.
Okay. So highly qualified would mean like very high FICO score. They're putting a lot down, and they could get, like, you're thinking the lowest right now would be about 4%.
Right. And I'm not a lender, but talking to my lenders and what I've been dealing with recently with customers, that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I know for residential, people can get as low as like 2.2 if they're lucky right now, right? And they dot all their I's, cross all their T's.
And that's like 30% or more down because the bank's like, no risk. These guys are super qualified. Then they get the best rates.
So you're looking at about like a point or two higher typically for a commercial real estate deal. And then you mentioned earlier, if you are going to do, let's say, less money down, it's going to end up being a higher interest rate. What are those interest rates looking at? Are they like 10, 15%, or is it even higher?
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of cases people will go in with like a hard money person, like a private money guy who's going to be like, I'll give you
the down payment,
50% down. Then you can go get your killer rate with the bank, but I'm going to charge you the 7% plus a point on the front. And if you sell it within 6 months, I'm going to charge you another point, that type of thing. So the investors are getting their money. So a lot of people are going private investors to get that big nest egg so they can have the 30-year fixed with a great rate and then try and knock off that 30 or 40 or 50% or whatever they borrowed quicker.
Okay, so after you figure out what you're going to be doing for the loan, how much you can put down, right? Like, what are the different types of properties that you deal with? You said you deal with hotels, you deal with like regular shopping centers, right? Like, what do you think is the best investment, and what do you typically like to work with?
I like to work with land. Like talking earlier about what I've done in my past and then building all this stuff. I'm comfortable working with the city. And if you're going to realize a profit, building is the best way to go because you can build it at cost.
Okay.
Pay your guys. And then if you're building it for $300 a square foot, in Dana Point or Newport Beach, you're 1,000 square foot or more, all up and done, right?
Got it. So you're saying in the long run, if you do know the people that can help you to create your home or create your building, it's actually going to be significantly cheaper for you if you just buy the land and then you go in and you build what you actually want there.
You save a couple $100 a square foot probably, and depending on the size of the property, that ends up being a lot of money.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say, on that end too, if they're going to go in and they're going to build, right, is that typically, how long does that project take, right? Because they have to take that in consideration because they're not going to be up for a year, 2 years, right?
Right.
So it's probably going to be a more savvy buyer who has more money that they can sit and wait for something to start than somebody who needs to get going now.
Yeah, you definitely have to have the horsepower for holding costs if you're going to be building something because you're not going to be making money. Like in the commercial world, you got to wait till people are coming there buying stuff before you're making any money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, could take a couple years depending where you're at. Residential property, if you're near the coast, it's going to take longer because you deal with the coastal commission. And that sometimes is a little bit of a nightmare and you got people.
What's the coastal commission?
They regulate anything from a mile from the beach to make sure you're, maintaining views and you're not dirtying the water, so to speak.
Got it.
The
And when
ocean
you say
waters
like
and
maintaining views means like I've heard a lot of regulations like you can't have your home over a certain amount of feet, right? You don't want to block somebody's view behind you, or
Right.
there's probably maybe there's an easement where somebody granted this space so you aren't blocking the view behind them, right?
Yeah, like views are expensive. If you have a $4 million house and half of it's the view, right? And somebody comes up and builds like a $7 million property in front of you and blocks your view and chops $1 million off of your property. Coastal Commission doesn't allow that to have. So even if you're allowed to build a property a certain height, you can't block a view. Then you have to bring it back down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So they're very respectful almost of all the people along the coast.
Right.
Is that like one of those positions where you can like, I mean, I guess if you're wealthy enough, you could probably pay the person behind you to allow you to have that easement, and that's something that they might allow?
Yeah, as long as you get this. Neighbors have to sign off on a lot of stuff. It's like living in an HOA. Be like, hey, I want to paint my door red. They're like, no, you can't paint your door red. And neighbors have to sign off on it. It's kind of like that, but on a bigger scale when you're living in the coastal communities. Even if the city allows it and the people don't want them to do it and they sign off on it, you could still probably get it done, but then you're gonna have some super pissed neighbors. But there's a fine line between blocking a view and obstructing a view. So
Got it. And for those of you who don't know what an easement is basically where you're going to reach out to the other landowner, and let's say that your property encroaches on their property or you want to build into their view. You can offer them some sort of compensation with like money, where you'd be like, hey, I'll give you $100,000, and then they'll give you something that you can put on their deed and on your deed, basically saying that they're allowing you to block their view because they gave you this much money. And you can also do it for like certain time periods. So it's going to be for a year, 2 years. Maybe you have to pay them $100,000 every year. But it's something that you'll work out with the owner of the property, because you're essentially encroaching on their rights, and they're giving you the authority to do so, which is going to be through some sort of contract or something on the deed itself.
yeah, they'll put it on the deed, and it's access too. Maybe you want to build a big fat place, but their land comes down to your backyard just enough to where you can't make a driveway to turn around because you want rear entrance on your driveway. So you have an easement with them so you can have a driveway and build the property you want. As long as obviously you have to sign off on it, and it gets registered with title companies and puts on the deed, so it's there forever. So something that you have to disclose throughout the life of the property.
I've heard of some weird easements, right? Because I've heard of like disputes between people's homes over like their palm trees or stuff like hanging over somebody else's house. And I know like I've had clients call me, they're like, oh yeah, my neighbor has a fruit tree that's just dropping shit all over our place. So they literally just take like the chainsaw, and there's anything that's like hanging 1 foot over, they're just like literally cutting it down. So have you heard of like some weird stuff involved with easements before?
Yeah, I mean, if it's affecting your property, you have a right to maintain your property. So if there's a tree pushing on something that's affecting your fencing, or maybe there's a tree on the neighbor's yard and it's starting to push up your swimming pool, right? Or if you're going to build a parking lot for your multifamily property, but because you're going to be digging near a tree, it's going to kill somebody's 150-year-old pine tree. There's all kinds of different situations where you get in disputes with neighbors where you have to figure it out financially. You can get on with your lives and have a profitable property.
Yeah, I know I had a friend recently call me. They have a house over in Palm Springs. And there's just this neighbor. She's like the creepy old witch is what he literally called her. And literally this lady just has all of the tallest, most beautiful trees. Look, I'm a fan of trees, but at the same time, it's blocking their entire views of the mountains. Like she just is in like the spot to like block everybody's views. So she's blocking like 5 homes' views. They've all come together collectively and they've offered her like $10,000, $20,000, and she's just given them a big FU. I'm not cutting down my trees, and the CCNRs don't help them. So there's nothing they can do, right? There's an easement about the size of the wall, but as long as her trees are within her property, there's nothing about the height of the trees. So they're all sitting there, and she's just got all of these huge, it's literally like she's created almost like a little castle wall around her property, and there's nothing, it's like a moat of trees. And it's like to the point where my friend, he's like, look, I might just even move, because like this is so much, like this is why I bought the place, was so that I could see the mountains, and we're out here and she's just blocking the view. But some people are reasonable, some people are not reasonable, right? A lot of times you want to, if you're in a scenario like that, what I've learned is it might not be a tangible money thing that could convince somebody to do it, right? Maybe they want something else. Maybe there's something you can offer them. Maybe you can buy them like a new vehicle or something. I know it sounds strange, but some extreme examples, right? Like what is the desire of that person, right? Maybe they really are into their trees. Maybe you offer to transplant the tree somewhere else. You really have to take a moment to dive into somebody's psyche and just kind of think, what do they want, instead of just what do you want? And if you find it and you hit those right trigger points, you can get lucky, right?
Right.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, I know I also had one of my close friends, he had an easement issue. His neighbors were being assholes, is a nice way of saying it. What happened was he built this bar in his backyard, which just had like, it had like a built-in keg inside of it, and it just like was a little bit up, and it wasn't blocking their view, and it didn't go over their line. But they made a big deal about it, and they said that the keg went over their property line. So we offered to pay them money because he hired me to like try to resolve it with them so he could go to the HOA. He offered me to go over there and say, what do you guys want? I don't want to take this down because it was going to cost him 20 grand to like take this thing down and rebuild it and move it at the different property line. So luckily we got one of our friends involved who's a general contractor, and he found a loophole. He went to the city and he looked at where the actual line was, the gradient line for where the wall could be. He found out that they actually misquoted it, and it wasn't from the point where they were describing. It was actually from a much lower point. So then he was able to basically give them a big FU back to them, and he built a wall even higher, and now he blocked their wall kind of like out of spite. So sometimes, just to give you the other flip of the coin, this stuff can backfire on you if you really don't know the law and you don't know what you're doing and you're just trying to be an asshole. People will find a way to get back at you. And so this was a win for my client, right? The other one, not so much of a win. He's still trying to deal with her.
Right, yeah, it's a nightmare. And you want happy neighbors because it just turns into a nightmare. And you can't roll the dice on if you're going to buy a property or not thinking you're going to be able to talk somebody out of what everybody's saying that they can't do. Ends up being a tough situation for a lot of people.
No, it's hard. I mean, it's your neighbors too. You don't want them, wishing black voodoo and sending evil spells on you, just being next door.
You want them to come over for a glass of wine, right?
Hang out, and like you can feel when somebody doesn't like you, right? And and especially if it's like 5 people hating one person, right? Now that person's super defensive, and they just create this like dark cloud of not wanting to communicate with any of their neighbors. You want to try to be as kind as you can with them.
Right.
So let's continue on talking about, you said right now that you think the smartest long-term play in commercial real estate is going to be buying land and building what you want, right? If you can hold out and you have the cash to do so. So let's talk about if you are going to buy a property, right, and you want to rent it out and you want to make a certain amount of, we're going to talk about what cap rate, triple net, I want to get into that stuff. But I want to talk about like if you're just looking to buy a place, let's say an apartment building, and you want to rent out all of it and you want to make money from it. What exactly would you advise, and how would you go about that process?
Well, especially right now and in California, I really like multifamily, and everything's elevated. So I'm really pushing my clients. Is like, they always ask me, when's the best time to sell? It's like, well, now's the best time to sell because it's way high. So selling your multifamily property right now is a great thing to do. But then it's always tough to get a buyer in there to pay the price you want because the cap rate, is, especially if you have debt on the property, if you're getting a loan, you're making $0 on it.
Let's stop you right there. What is cap rate?
Cap rate's its capitalization rate. So that is the profit you're making figured as a percentage point.
Okay. Can you give us an example?
So if you buy a property for $100,000 and you're making $10,000 a month on that property, you're going to pay it off in 10 years.
Is that $10,000 a month like in rent, or is that profit?
Well, it's profit. It's rent. So basically, if you can pay the building off in 10 years, that's your 10x multiplier. But the cap rate is, it's hard. I'd like to write it down. I could explain it a lot easier if I could write it down. But if it's $1 million property and you're bringing in $10,000 a month in 10 years, you'll make that $1 million. So that's basically a 10 cap.
Okay.
That's kind of how that works out.
Okay, because you'll pay off the property and now you'll be getting just residual rent, right? Every single month because it's been completely paid off in cash.
Right. So the more money you put into the property is the less debt you have, the higher your cap rate gets. So, and then you got to factor in all your expenses out of that too.
Okay, like maintenance of the building, repairs,
taxes, vacancies.
What is the tax on a commercial property? Is it different than a residential?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah. It's whatever your tax rate is in your area.
And that's usually done by the land assessor, right? They go ahead and they look over that.
You assess the value, and then 1.2%.
Okay.
A lot of places in Southern California. In some places, it's more than that. Newer areas.
Got it. And so, what is a typical cap rate for when you're renting a residential property?
So if you own like a 5-plex and you want to rent it, if you want to sell it, if you're buying a property and it's at a 5 cap, you're looking pretty good in California.
Okay, 5%.
Ohio, you're probably 7, 8, 9 cap plus.
Got it. And so
prices are way down though.
So 5 cap means that it's 5% of the overall value of the place. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're making 5% on your money basically.
Okay, got it. And that's per year.
Right, and that's the purchase price of the property, not your loan amount.
Got it. That's the purchase price and not your loan amount. Okay, understood. And then, of course, you have to take into consideration repaying the loan, and so, the cap rate might be not as high your actual money back is not as high as what it would be, right? Because you're having to pay the mortgage, and then you'd be making the extra in profit from the rent.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. And so, when you're working with hotels, is their specific cap rate, or no? They have to basically rent out the hotel, so it's a little bit different, right?
It's still based on a cap rate. It's like, how much money is this unit or is this building, is this business making? You know,
Okay.
maybe from a car wash to a hotel, that you could break down as a cap rate. And that is an easy way to let investors know what they're getting for their money, how much money they're going to be making.
Got it.
And then they can go in there and dive into everything. Because taxes are going to go up when you buy it. Somebody owned it for 20 years, they're paying less in taxes.
Why is
your
that?
assessed value is going to be way down.
Oh, because of what the assessed value was at the time of purchase.
Right, and then they reassess it every few years.
Yeah.
But it comes up just on, cost of living percentage. But if you own a property for 30 years and you bought it for $40,000 and you sell it for 2.5, your tax basis is super low.
Yeah.
And you're making a lot of money on that property.
Oh, because it's basing it off of the assessed value, not off of what the sale price
Right.
is.
So when the new person comes in there, they better make sure that their people are,
Yeah.
taking into consideration what their new assessed value is going to be.
Yeah.
When they're looking at their cap rates.
Yeah, and I also heard, like, if you transfer ownership from one person to another, that can mess with the reassessed value. So if you have it for a couple of years, let's say it goes up, like you said, 20 years, 2.5, even transferring it from, let's say, a father to his child, right? Just that transfer alone might cause the property to be reassessed, which screws his tax benefits in the long run, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you need to put it into a trust, because then you can just, person takes over basically and it stays where it's at.
Okay.
So if the original owner dies, it passes, you keep that low basis, and then they can keep that property at the same assessed value.
Got it.
But
So
when they sell it to, regardless to who they sell it to, then it's going to get reassessed.
Got it. So you're saying that while they're alive, do they have to purchase it and immediately put it into a trust, or you can move it into a
You can
trust
move it into a
after?
trust whenever you want. That's not going to affect the assessed value, my understanding.
Okay, understood. And then the trust can allow it to be transferred to another person, or does it only act upon their death?
You can transfer it out of the trust if somebody's incapacitated or they want to be bought out or something like that. You can do a side transaction and take your name off the deed and pass it to your heirs, so to speak, if they're in the trust.
Okay.
So that's the whole point of a trust, is to save on taxes and make sure your heirs get the property without probate, right?
Understood. Okay. And what areas do you think are the best for when people are looking to invest? Does it kind of just depend on what their business is? Does it depend on what they're looking for? Or what areas do you like to work in the most that you've seen like high ROIs on?
I see high ROIs on people who've owned property for a long time, or new construction places where people don't have debt.
What would you consider a long time?
Well, if you bought a property 20 years ago, you're going to have a ton of equity in the property, probably have the building paid off.
Yeah.
If you're a good landlord, you're raising the rents, maintaining, managing the building correctly, and now you're collecting a lot of rent and you don't have a lot of debt on the property. That's a good scenario.
Okay, got it.
But it also depends on areas. Do you want to manage the property, or do you want somebody else to manage it for you? When you're young and in your 30s or 40s and you're like, hey, I'm going to buy this 15-unit property in this up-and-coming area, and when I retire at 65 or 75, I'll own it outright and I'll be getting a bunch of money in. A lot of people, they retire and they're like, oh, this property is harder to manage and maintain now that I'm older.
Yeah.
It's turning into another full-time job, which I don't want. So they're like, I want to sell, but I have a huge capital gains. What do I do?
Okay.
Type of scenario. So I can help them in a tax-deferred sales transaction where they can still be getting dividends on the property, and they don't have to manage it anymore.
Got it. I was gonna.
Sell it, yeah.
You mentioned, managing the property is a lot, right? Like, my family, we own several properties, and that's, my dad is always complaining about having to go out and manage those properties. But I know that there's companies such as property managers, right? So, can you explain what a property manager is, and like, how do they get paid, and can they just handle the whole process for you so you can just collect on your rent and income?
100%, absolutely. Property managers typically take a percentage of the rents, the gross rents coming in.
Yeah.
So 10%, I think on average, maybe 8 to 10% on average.
10% of gross rent, is that before or after expenses?
It's before expenses.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll do everything. They'll do whatever you want. You'll pay more for the more stuff they do. But if there's a vacancy, they'll market, keep the place clean. They'll vet the tenants. They'll pull the credit. They'll get the leases drawn up. They'll do everything.
So it's
They'll
like, it's
collect the
almost
checks.
worth alleviating yourself of all this headache just to hire a property managing company?
Depending on how many units you have, and depending on how well run those units are. Some units, you have 15 units and everybody's really good. They've been in there for a long time, and property managers are like, yeah, this is super easy because checks come in and I deposit them, and they even pay bills and all that stuff. And then,
they handle everything.
And then you just audit everything as an owner once a year just to make sure that the money's going in the right place, paying vendors that need to be paid, that type of thing.
Got it. I mean, this sounds great. So you hire a property manager, they manage payments, they manage getting everything fixed. They really, if it gets vacant, they'll rent it out for you. And then on top of that, they'll just really deal with any problems that come along the way. All you have to do at the end of the day is really say, CPA, handle figuring this out. And, whatever I keep. And then you alleviated like 90% of your stress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's expensive. So, I mean, if you're collecting $2,000 a month for 10 units, right? $20,000 a month, and they're taking 10% of that, and that's $2,000.
Yeah, but I mean, 10% is 10% is less stress, which is really, I think it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the client. If they like to get their hands dirty and do that, or if they're a little bit older and they're like, you know what, I'm happy with paying the 10%.
Yeah,
and then they just go to vacation.
Yeah, it depends on what they want.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like you said, it comes down to really what people desires. What do they want? What are they trying to accomplish, right? So I'm sure that in your job, right, you're really having to cater to different types of personalities. It's like, what is this person trying to accomplish in the long run? Do they just want to make money now off of rent? Do they want to hold this for 20 years? Do they want to go in and just make their rent cheaper by owning the property and then not having to outsource a lot of it? And you're almost just having to kind of see what their goals are. Do you have like strategy sessions when you're first bringing somebody in to figure out what they're really trying to accomplish? Because they might think it's one thing and it's actually something else.
And the majority of the times it's something else. But I have to come down, have them in the office, sit down. A lot of times I'll talk to them about their needs and their wants, their must-haves and their possible maybes. And then I'll print out a bunch of properties and we'll sit down, we'll talk about all of them.
Yeah.
It gets into those discussions on how much money do you want to spend? How much money do you actually have? What do you think it's going to cost versus what is it actually going to cost? That type of thing. So I try to have all those conversations with them to make sure that they're, a valid buyer.
Yeah.
And then we can take the next step.
Yeah, I mean, really, it comes down to your first step when you're coming to get a property is what are you trying to accomplish, right? Like, what is the long-term goal here? What is the short-term goal? Because when you're thinking about those things, you can now plan properly. You can come to you, and then you're going to know what you're looking for, right? Because, I mean, we do live in California. There's really an endless, I'm sure, supply of different properties and different ways that you can really try and go make money off of investment.
Absolutely. Yeah, and vetting the client, it's not that easy, but talking to their lender, if they give me that information, because they're the one that has all the information. So if they say things are good and they're ready to go, their income is there, and they have the proof of funds for down payments and things like that, that's usually the first real step to know you have a qualified or interested person who wants to go out and look at stuff.
Okay.
Interested company.
Yeah. And what are the types of companies that you're seeing right now? Like, is there a specific trend that's going on at this time being? I mean, from what that's things that I read and things that I look up, like a lot of the biggest companies ever come out of recessions, right? Have you seen like a trend of like people that are going out of business? I'm sure restaurants is one of them, but is there something specifically right now that you've seen a bigger trend in people coming to you and asking for help with getting commercial real estate?
Mostly in like the outdoor space because people are kind of getting outdoorsy right now.
Yeah.
So the bicycle space, electric bikes especially.
Oh, wow.
Those people are like, we are slammed and we don't have any more room in this place. 3 months back ordered on different stuff. So a lot of times these bike companies will have the product shipped to the homeowner or the purchaser, and then they will have them bring it in because they don't have the room to store it anymore because they have 50 bikes they're trying to put together. And a lot of these places are small corner shops with like 2 guys working in there.
Yeah.
And there's boxes stacked up on the cash register. So that's probably the biggest thing I've seen is that, and then surfing, this your outdoor stuff, a lot of hiking.
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, nobody could have predicted a pandemic, right? And so the industries that have thrived, right, how could you ever plan for that? And it's really interesting to see who's making it during this time, right? Like, because even on the restaurant side of things, like I have a friend, he manages a restaurant down in San Diego, but they haven't really been hurt too bad because they are full patio. So they were able to like serve people as long as they were open, and they've been pretty full the entire time, so it hasn't affected them. But of course, restaurants that don't have an option for doing any outside seating because there might not be an area around it, they're just basically shut out of luck. And they're sitting there and they're having to shut doors and they're having to close because there's nothing they can do.
Yeah, I mean, cities are throwing the like parking regulations and things like that out to the wind. They're extending, no alcohol beyond this point.
Yeah.
They're moving those signs so they can set up stuff in parking lots just to keep these businesses alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's smart because the city needs these businesses to thrive or they're not going to make any money. And then this alcohol to go thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought that I would see a spike in DUI cases with this alcohol to go thing. I haven't seen any spike whatsoever. So I think it's perfectly okay to allow people to take their, alcohol to go, just take it home or whatever it may be, right? As long as you're responsible. And I think Uber and Lyft, of course, have a huge portion as to why that things are just safer in general.
Right. Yeah, driving wise, alcohol wise, yeah. I mean, there's still those people out there who make those mistakes, but I haven't seen anything negative as far as that come about.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting. It's changing the whole restaurant industry and how they're moving forward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I mean, other things that are thriving, like you look at all this building on these coastal communities, Dana Point, Newport, all these big houses, all these multi-family properties, mixed use spaces. They, like you said, you can't predict a pandemic. They didn't predict a pandemic, but they're right in the middle of building these and trying to get these places leased up. It's hitting them hard right now. They're still going through, because it's going to be over at some point and people are going to get back to work and start spending money. So it looks like those places are thriving because they're being built right now, but they started a year or longer ago.
Got it.
They started the process, and they kind of like once the ball starts rolling, you can't really stop unless the money runs out.
So you help people also find like leasing in buildings, right? Is that true? That comes along with commercial real estate?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really do tenant. I mean, residential leasing. I do mostly commercial leasing.
Yeah.
So that's, for all different things, from like janitorial storage companies to CBD companies, attorneys.
Yeah.
So that space right now, there's a ton of stuff available.
Yeah.
And I get calls on the regular for places I've looked at, and they're like, hey, is your client still interested? We're going to drop the price down again.
Yeah.
So, there's some opportunity there if somebody needs an office space.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that are like, we're just going to hang back and see what happens because we're okay now.
Yeah.
A lot of that's going on.
So let's talk about the trend right now. This is going to be for the viewers. Let's definitely make a clip of this. So let's talk about COVID's happening, right? So people don't want to be in an office. I'm just going to give you an example for me. Like, we've closed our doors, when it comes to like having an actual office. We're just doing everything virtual, and a lot of companies are going down this road, which isn't the best for you. And it's also tough on the people that own commercial property because they want to make sure that they are renting out these places, right? So right now, people are not coming in. They're not trying to rent out. So you're saying that you're seeing a trend that actually things are at a huge discount, and they're willing to work with people through maybe tenant improvements, or maybe you can kind of elaborate on how that's happening right now.
Yeah, I'm not seeing huge discounts, but I am seeing prices come down a little bit. A lot of these big companies, these huge management companies that do the Newport Towers and all these different places with all these huge, hundreds of units, and they've just spent millions redoing it with outdoor areas and food trucks and things like that. It's pretty much a ghost town right now.
Yeah.
So these companies, they have a lot of holding power. So they're just hanging tight because obviously you can't sell a building that has 20% occupancy when 6 months ago it had 80% occupancy. That type of, you can't sell a building for a profit at that point. Nobody's going to want to jump in there. So a lot of these companies are on a holding pattern, waiting for people to start coming back in.
Got it. But if you are looking to potentially move into a commercial real estate place or some sort of commercial property, this is going to be the time for you to start looking. You probably can get better rates. It's not going to be maybe significant, but it's going to be better than normal. And you probably are going to be able to get things like tenant improvements. Tenant improvements means that the property owners themselves will allow you to have money to like make changes. You might be able to add some desks in, or can you give an example of what tenant improvements are?
Tenant improvements can be anything that the business needs going in there. It could be walls, lighting, windows, office space, even in some cases furniture.
Yeah.
Depending on how, I don't want to say desperate, but how willing the owner is to work with the people coming in. And the longer your lease term is the more willing and the more money that they will put into your tenant improvements.
Yeah.
And there's no real limit on it. It's just basically a negotiation between leasee and leaseor.
Got it. So this is, really a time that people need to be looking into that if they are looking into it.
If they're going to get back into it, now's a good time to go look at some office space. Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah. You get like months for free. There's all kinds of things you could work into that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. That's super interesting. It's also just a different landscape entirely. What I've learned too, I just hired another full-time person, and she lives in Sacramento. And I know that sounds weird, but we've actually been fully efficient, and she actually has more experience than even me. She has 19 years experience in the legal field. And it's a wild time because I think it's kind of opening people's eyes, seeing that you can do most things virtually now, right? You can do things through Zoom. Now, of course, there's never going to be anything different than face-to-face meetings, right? This is always what people should strive to do. But with the fear in the media and the fear that's going on in the world, it's a terrifying landscape because I can't even get clients to come in and meet me face to face. They prefer to do everything over Zoom. I'm signing up clients regularly when it just comes with phone calls. A lot of people have never even seen me face to face, and I will represent them for the entire case. They'll go to the doctors, we'll give them a settlement check, and the only time they might come face to face is I'll be insistent about I want to give them their settlement check in person. But it's wild that we've now been scared to have human contact. Like, it's almost like instilled inside of us, and it's going to be something that's potentially going to be like this until a vaccine is given. It's just scary because this is how people feel, right? They're in so much fear that they don't want to have social interactions, and they're going to stay locked up almost in like their little cubes or their homes for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's very, very weird and scary times for a lot of people. I mean, if you're at risk, the last thing you want to do is put yourself at risk.
Yeah.
You know, potentially life-threatening situation for you or your family.
Yeah.
You definitely have to be careful.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, even if the vaccine comes out soon, it's going to be a fast-tracked vaccine. I talk to a lot of people that are like, I'm not taking that. I'm going to wait, right?
Dude, I have a friend who's like, he's like, he's ready to take it like yesterday. So like, you have the flip side of the coins, right? Like, I have one friend, he's like, I want to go fucking see people.
Right.
So he's like, just give me whatever vaccine's going to come out. I don't care. Just put it in me so I can go live my normal life. So you kind of have the flip of both sides, which of course I don't acknowledge or say that's a smart idea, but that's where he's at. He's like, that's what I want. So I can go back to normalcy because that's what people are waiting for.
And it's definitely not going to be like a mandatory thing. They can't do that. It's going to be similar to the flu shot. It's going to be seasonal. Yeah. So it's COVID season, right?
Yeah.
Or it's flu season, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it's ever going to go away.
Yeah. We'll kind of just take it day by day, right?
Get used to it, right?
But, you know, there is the negatives, but then on the flip side, right, like that comes from me, like being able to hire someone in Sacramento. I'm realizing that we just live in a different climate, right? A climate. And so basically, if you have your laptop, if you have your computer, and you have your phone, you can pretty much work from anywhere on the planet, short of, you know, if I have to be in a courtroom, right? Or if you have to be like for an actual face-to-face meeting. But DocuSign and all of these CRMs and all of these management systems and tools and Zoom, it shows you that we just live in a different universe. And you don't have to hire a full-time employee, let's say, right? So even the person that I hired, you know, she's working for me full-time, but when I first started here, it was like 20, 30 hours, and now it's grown into 80 hours. But you can really find people that are specialists in their field. They like the freedom of being able to work for multiple people, not being locked down, you know, with working with just a company, and they're super efficient, right? Ever since we went full virtual, I see my employees, I get notifications at 1 or 2 in the morning, they're getting their shit done. You know, it doesn't require them to be in an office at a specific time. They're just getting things done when they get things done.
Right.
And I don't care, as long as they get it done. I don't care what time you do it, right? As
that's
long
the
as
majority, right?
Yeah, so it's a different climate, but it's also exciting, right? We're just kind of learning things and moving in different directions.
Yeah, everybody wanted to do this, and a lot of people wanted to work from home or be virtual 50% of the time, and they're like, no, we're not comfortable doing that, and then bam, they're forced into it, and they're like, oh, guess what? It's not so bad. It's working okay.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting. So, and then I'm a big fan of. I mean, I drive around a lot when I look at properties, and I meet people places. So I do that less now, and people are only doing it when they're pretty fired up about a property and they want to go see it. We're getting close to signing. So that's nice. And there's not as much traffic.
So you're saying
I can just
people
leave
are
whenever I
buying
want.
without seeing the property?
People are writing offers now before they see the property.
That is fucking wild to me.
Right?
That is crazy. And these aren't small properties. These are like a couple million properties, most of them, right?
Oh yeah, in some cases bigger than that.
Yeah.
There's just, they just write a note on the contract saying, it's obviously another contingency we're going to add is on physical and inspections.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Because there's so many people out there wanting to buy properties, especially in like the under $2 million ones.
Yeah.
Property comes up on the market and they're like, 6 people are interested into it, but I can't get to it till Wednesday and it's Friday right now. So we send an offer in, see if, we're in the running because offers are coming in like
this
right away.
This is because of interest rate, right? People are just
a lot of it's
super
because
hungry.
of interest rates. There's limited properties on the market right now.
Yeah, that's super interesting to me too, right? That everybody's just out there gobbling up properties when a lot of people are losing their jobs. And but it seems like because of the interest rates, people are just like, we'll buy it, we can rent it out, we'll still make a certain amount of cash flow because the rent due to the low interest rate is going to be so low that even if we're making this much off of the money, then we're going to be coming a profit in the long run, right? And then you just got to hold on to it for like 10 years, right? You might be buying it at a high, but you're still going to make the cash flow, so it's still appealing to a lot of individuals.
Yeah, I mean, low debt it's kind of the golden rule. You have no or low debt, that's how you make your money. Once you start putting debt on a property, then you're paying the bank your profit.
Yeah.
I mean, almost all of it.
Yeah.
In some cases, you just love the property and you want it to be like, a legacy property for your family. So, hey, let's just buy this. In like 10 years, we're going to start turning a profit. Maybe you're making a bunch of money elsewhere and you can write off a lot of it on taxes. There's a lot of that too.
Yeah.
And other people are, selling a property that's highly appreciated, and they're buying something else, like on a 1031 exchange type of thing.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to pay taxes or not pay taxes. I'll spend a little bit more on this property, and then they pay cash for it.
Yeah, and so, I've heard in the residential market that there's a very low supply, right? And there's a high demand. Is that the same thing in commercial right now too?
Yes, because there's still investors who want to buy properties, but still everybody wants to sell their property for the highest and best value, regardless of how many people are in it, how much money they're making. It'll come back. Here's what it was, a year ago. Obviously things, so they're trying to use that as, the background to sell their property for the highest and best use. And then the investors are coming in being like, oh, well, we're going to wait a little bit. Even though there's not much on the market, things are going to come on the market. I think right now investors in a lot of the multifamily space and the hotel space are waiting for people to default, because renters don't pay their mortgage, landlords aren't paying their mortgage type of thing. So guess what? Things start going into default, and then they start swooping around, picking up things for deals.
Yeah.
The bank's like, I don't want to eat this.
No, it's crazy. I mean, I kind of want to talk about, a lot of people probably hear the term eviction moratorium. So a lot of cities, they put an eviction moratorium. So what that means is the cities are telling people that you can't evict people right now, and you can't charge them for not paying their rent, right? So a lot of people are just not paying their rent, and they think that hearing eviction moratorium means that rent is forgiven for those couple of months. Let me be very clear. Your rent is not forgiven. An eviction moratorium does not mean that you don't have to pay it. It just means that they have to wait to sue you to get the money that is owed. And, to understand, you're going to get that lawsuit later on down the road, and it's going to come your way. And just because you didn't pay because of COVID doesn't mean that you're not still obligated to give them the money that is due for that rent. So you might avoid it, you might get evicted, and you might end up having to leave the place, but you're going to end up owing that money at some point. We haven't even begun to see the repercussions of that downfall, right? And so like you said, foreclosures, people are coming through a tough time, and a lot of landowners, right, if the people aren't paying their rent, how are they going to pay their mortgage? And so it's almost like a trickling domino effect that we haven't seen the repercussions yet. And, I'm on my end, when I talk to a lot of financial advisors, they say a crash is eventually going to come. We just don't know when, because the government supplemented by making these interest rates locked in so low for 2 years. So it might be until these interest rates are not locked in, and then everything might collapse. But who knows? And that's a little bit morbid to think of it, but there's a high percentage chance that something like that could occur.
Well, I mean, we learned the hard way, when they stopped lending, interest rates went through the roof, the market tanked because everybody's pulling back. So I think right now they're doing everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. There's going to be a correction, but there was just one a couple months ago, right?
Yeah.
It went way down and then came right back.
Yeah.
I mean, surprisingly fast, it came right back. So I don't know if the drops are going to be more extreme and they come back quicker. It's not going to take 10 years like it did in 2008.
Yeah.
But I've seen landlords, like good business people, thinking about the long term. The tenants are, late, so they reach out to their tenants and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" They're like, "Oh, I was a barber, my shop closed down," or "I'm a bartender, I'm not serving drinks at the Ritz anymore." But they were making 150 grand, as a bartender, killing it with tips. And so these owners are saying, "Hey, I'll give you the next 2 months, get back on your feet, stay the course." And, if you stay in, then I'll forgive that.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them, especially with the smaller units, they're like, hey, it's more family oriented. So they know their tenants. Tough to do when there's 1,000 unit place. So like, I don't know you. It's like, cut and dry. That's all there is to it. But some of these smaller ones, 20 units and less, they're like, hey, you know what? Landlords are doing good. They got a lot of money. Usually it's not their only type of business.
Yeah.
So they're helping their tenants out.
Yeah.
So it's looking
at it. That's awesome.
Thrilled about it, and they want to stay there.
Yeah.
And which means if the tenant does leave, they're going to be calling their buddies to be like, "Hey, I place opened up here. So they're going to get new people back. Very smart on some of these landlords by doing that. Sucking up a little bit versus, going through the lawsuit nightmare, and they're probably not going to get money in the long run anyways.
Yeah, so. It's going to be tough because everyone's going to be broke, right, when they come out of it. I mean, I know on my end, right, I do a lot of employment law cases, and I can say that I've been getting, 10, 20 leads almost a day because people are getting fired for different COVID reasons. They're getting laid off. They make complaints, and it's just, we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of what's going on right now in later time, but we just haven't begun to see it yet. And we're not probably going to even have any idea because the government is most likely going to just be pumping free money to everybody until the vaccine is out, because what else are they going to do, right? Like, how else are they going to keep the economy going and keep people going without everyone freaking out?
But I mean, they're pumping out money, yes, and that's great for a lot of people, but a lot of people are like, I'm making more money now than when I was working. Why am I going to go look for a job, right? So that money's going to have to run out sometimes to get everybody back into it.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess I understand that a little bit, but I think it's going to bite them later on.
And I think it's going to be a big problem later on. It's for sure. I mean, like, it's funny though, once again, to even kind of look at the positives of COVID, right? Like, one of my close friends the other day, we were hanging out, a group of us celebrating an engagement, and she was talking about her kids. She said that, right, they just opened up schools again. Some schools are opened up again. And she said that her kids were so excited. They were up at like 6:30 in the morning, fully dressed, teeth brushed, meal eaten, ready to go to school, because they've never experienced like something like this before, right? Like, they've never been in a position where they're like, I can't hang out with my friends. I can't see my friends. And a lot of kids were in their prime, right? Like, imagine you're a senior in high school or a junior in high school and you can't even take your SAT, right? I know a lot of people that graduated even law school, they couldn't take the bar. They're not going to be able to take it, I think, until this coming year. So it's affected everybody's lives, right? We're adults. We have our businesses. We're going to be okay. But the emotional damage that these kids are suffering is something on a different, macro level that we're not going to understand for a long time.
How's graduation? They're like, they mailed me my diploma type of thing.
Yeah,
right? No, I get it, right? That's devastating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You bust your ass at UCLA and you want to walk and they're like, nope, sorry. You're like, whoops.
Yeah.
That's a drag.
Yeah, I mean, once again, on the other flip side, I have a friend, he's been thriving. He's created a virtual platform for colleges and for high schools for graduation parties where people hang out on Zoom, which is like, it's a very strange world that we live in. And it's like, we've almost become like addicted to our phones and addicted to like being in front of a screen 24 hours a day. And that's the norm. And if we're not doing that, I get anxiety like not looking at my phone, right?
It was tough before this happened, and now you have to do it, or you're not you can't network anymore, right? No, so you do network stuff, and you try to do fun networking stuff like, hey, everybody wear your favorite sporting outfit, and we'll network, or let's do a 5 o'clock one, and everybody bring their favorite cocktail, and we'll have like a happy hour networking thing. So that's been kind of cool, but still, like my business, real estate, if I'm not meeting people face to face, it's tough to sign on the dotted line, right?
Yeah, and then I wanted to also talk too, so I know that you have a lot of different interests, and I know one thing that you're heavily involved in is charity. You guys had a golf tournament the other day, correct? For one of your charities. Oh, yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to talk about what you're involved in, how you give back, and I want to talk about, what are these organizations and why do you love working with them?
It kind of started when I was flipping all those properties for the banks, and you go into these places, and I'm like, how long have you lived here? And they're like 4 years. They call me Real Estate Mike, and I get them pizzas, and they wanted to help.
Real Estate Mike.
Yeah, they were really anxious to do something instead of push a shopping cart around and start to go make some money. However, they did that. But I felt really bad for them, and I tried to call these local support hotlines, and I didn't get any help. So every time I went out there, I'd bring them food, I'd make sandwiches, like little goodie bags and things for them. I'd always keep a couple of bags like in my car. So if I saw somebody, I'd be like, hey, here's your little, a Coke and a sandwich and an apple. So that it struck a chord with me, and these people needed help and they couldn't get it anywhere. When I transitioned from contracting to real estate, I connected with the Mercy Warehouse. This is 2010 or 11, and I started volunteering there because I had time. Like, I was doing my real estate test. Construction was, they negotiated my contracts, and I'm like, too much risk. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to change gears. Yeah. While I was changing gears, I started volunteering at the Mercy Warehouse, and at the time they were doing, 50 people a day or something like that, helping people out. And I would go get their refrigerator van. I go to like Vons, Whole Foods, Walmart sometimes, and they would have stuff set aside for the Mercy Warehouse, and I would load it up, and I'd bring it back to the Mercy Warehouse, put it up in their fridge inside there. So on the 3 days where they gave food away, they got the food from those places. And Whole Foods, I mean, I'm looking at the stuff, I'm like, oh, here's 50 things of guacamole that expire tomorrow, and they're $7 each, right? Shopping carts full of this stuff. I'm like, there's thousands of dollars worth of food here that Whole Foods is going to throw away, but we have a relationship, or Mercy Warehouse has a relationship. So I thought that was totally cool. Yeah. So Chris Vizzi, he started up this Lift Foundation. I'm on the board of the Lift Foundation, and the first...
Do they have a website?
Yeah, liftfoundation.us.
Okay. And what's the Mercy Warehouse one?
That's mercywarehouse.com. You can just Google that, Laguna Niguel Mercy Warehouse.
So that's mercywarehouse.com and liftfoundation.us if anybody's interested.
Yeah, and you can go to liftfoundation.us and see all of our platforms and every place we give to there.
Yeah.
So we started giving there, and we did this little golf tournament at San Juan Hills Golf Course, raised $2,500 and gave it to them. And we're like, we love golfing. This was totally fun. Yeah. Let's ramp it up and let's do this as our big give. So we went to Monarch Beach.
And that's just...
It was St. Regis, now it's Monarch Golf Links, right? So we've been doing that for 8 years now, giving back.
You see, but that's also an example, like, we're not restricted from doing everything, right? You're still going out there, you're doing charity, you can still contribute, you can still give back to people, and you're doing it in a fun way, right? When it comes to contribution, like, you can always find some way to give back, and this is a fun way of doing it where you're enjoying yourselves, everybody's having a good time, and it's still a social activity where you're not having to be locked up, just like pushing a screen, giving your credit card. This is something good that you can give back and have a good time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the people like Project Self-Sufficiency, when we get to Precious Lambs, the Young and the Brave, they're helping us with, like, the Young and the Brave gives us surfboards to auction off every year. Some of these success stories through these groups are there to talk to people. So it's a hands-on, and people are learning about these different areas that are very local. We try to stick very local so we can see the difference. And it's been a fantastic thing, and I couldn't see myself not doing it.
That's awesome.
It's great, yeah.
Very cool. So I want to kind of like segue a little bit and ask you a couple questions. So, I want to talk about the habit that you think is something that makes you a high-level performer. And, I feel like almost we've been having a conversation about contributing. And I'm wondering if this is might be one of your things where it makes you feel good about yourself, allows you to feel like your soul is full and that you're basically on point because you're giving back to others. Or is there something else that you would like to share that really helps you as an individual?
No, I mean, things that strike a chord with me that, make me feel good, I like to do, that, lift me up in life and in business and spirit, is giving back with the charities. So that's something that I'll always do because I have the time for it. I can make my schedule and make that happen. I block it out every week, so that's just part of my week. Other things that I do, I like to golf. I don't get out as much as I like to do, but I run quite a bit. And I have a 2-year-old, and he loves sitting in that stroller. I just put on Pandora, like right on top of him, put the thing down, give him some snacks, and we run all over Laguna Niguel.
That's
awesome.
I
got like a 5.5 mile loop we do. I mean, I don't run the whole thing, and we're going up dirt hills and over the Colinas Trail, and it's views, and I can get out there, get my sweat on, get the guy to nap, which is always a win.
I'm sure he's stoked about it. Yeah.
Right. So he's happy, I'm happy, and then I can just, I can pray, I can think, I can,
Is prayer a big part of your life?
Yeah. Prayer's a big part of life. We try to pray all the time with the family. Little 5-year-old next week, she does prayers for us at dinner time and nighttime. It's really a cute, a sweet thing, just having the Lord part of our life. But just getting out there and, just giving yourself up to, wherever your mind wants to go and whatever comes in, and just try and, decompress kind of, and getting out there when you push yourself.
Yeah.
Like the only thing you think about is your heart rate and your breathing and stuff like that too. So
I was going to ask, do you listen to like a podcast or music when you run? Or are you saying it's just a time for you to meditate almost and like think about life?
Yeah, I mean, I put on Big Daddy Weave, it's a Christian station on Pandora.
Very cool.
And then, it just kind of goes in my mind, and I'm out there just,
And Big Daddy Weave, is that like a sermon or is that like a song?
It's songs.
Okay.
I think Big Daddy Weave is an artist.
Okay.
And on Pandora, you just put an artist and it picks a bunch of artists from that genre. So so that does that. So I get all the different artists and, like Christian songs basically that come out of it. So it works good. And then you can pump in the Christian music to your, it benefits us, and we like it quite a bit. So I try to get the whole family out there running. But my daughter and my little boy in there, it's pretty hard to push him around.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
So so that's
No, but that's amazing. I mean, running is such like a good activity, right? To just kind of like go clear your head. I know for myself, I like to go and I like to run and I like to listen to books or I like to listen to podcasts, but I've also been teetering more towards not listening to anything, right? Just sometimes just running and just thinking is like good because people have no idea, like, you know, some people call it being bored, right? Or not having something distracting them, right? Not looking at their phone. But people have no idea the benefits of just taking 15 minutes away from a screen, 20 minutes away from a screen. Because if you have a thought or something that you want to dive down, it might be 7 tangents in your mind that you finally got to the solution to the problem that you originally had, but you kind of need times during your day to really dissect during things. And I know like a lot of high level performers, they talk about meditating in the morning, meditating at night, right? Everybody has different forms of meditation. I think meditating is just, you know, not being distracted, being focused on your thoughts. And
it's your personal relaxation. And just running may be relaxing to you.
Yeah.
It's probably physically strenuous, but that may be your meditation. And that's kind of mine because sometimes I don't put the music on if I go by myself or something like that. I don't have music.
Even the right songs too. It's like, it can be a form of meditation, right? If it's something where you're not like super into it and jamming into it and you're just listening for the sake, because people also have noises when they meditate, right? It's just really a time to think. And so it's good that you take a time to think. And I try to at least like set aside a couple of minutes every morning and every night. And I, you know, one of my rules is first thing when I wake up in the morning, I try not to touch my phone for at least an hour. It's sometimes very difficult, of course, just when our entire lives revolve around a phone. But if you can do that, what I've noticed is like just my stress levels go down about 25%, and that echoes into the whole entire day because you have no idea how much your phone just stresses you out, right? Like from emails to text messages to phone calls, people just needing shit from you, no matter who it is, whether it's your girlfriend or somebody at work or a client or employee, just really starting your day off like that is super beneficial, and ending your night off instead of just the last thing you did, just staring at a screen, is super beneficial too.
Right. I mean, I can't, if I look at my phone and I put it down, I need at least 45 minutes of no screen time.
Yeah.
Just to forget about what was on my phone, until my brain to like change gears.
Yeah, it's like
the lights in the front of my face.
Yeah, it's like you need a minute to like almost like discombobulate. Like your brain just needs to go, okay, I'm done with this, and you're still lingering, you're lingering, and then the solution is not to put on another screen, because then you just go from one screen to like the TV screen. It's really got to take a minute and just kind of like disintegrate almost away from the phone and what it's trying to imbue on you, whether it's the emotion or somebody needing something or whatever it may be.
Right.
Yeah. So let's also talk about another question I like to discuss is, let's hear about some of your craziest clients. I want to hear about maybe your one craziest, maybe your two craziest, but what did you learn from them? And I want to hear the story of what happened.
Oh man, where do I start? It's been a lot of crazy clients. I mean, I'd have to go with the craziest. The craziest thing was probably back in my construction days with these banks being my clients, because they're the ones paying me, and just dealing with all of those people behind the scenes. It's not just one person I deal with. It's like, it's a bank. You deal, every time you call, it's somebody different. So, and I'm a very trusting person. So a lot of times they would give me the verbal okay, and I would start working on some stuff, and then it would come back that's not approved. And I'm like, you know, I get myself into a tough spot when I, you know, trying to do a great job for them and doing some stuff. And it didn't work out that way. And there's not a lot of, there's people who I don't understand. Tough to call them crazy.
Yeah.
But there's a few different people over the years, you know, make an offer, put the earnest money down, go through all the expenditures, they're good with everything, loans getting approved, and then gonna close in like 2 days. And they're like, we've changed our mind. And I'm like, what? I mean, we signed off on contingencies. It's like, we're done. They're like, we're out.
Yeah.
Like, and it cost you 50 G's. They're like, that's fine. I'm out. It's not going to work out for us in the long run. We've changed. And then that was the very, very shocking to me that people could go that deep and not understand it. I mean, can't even explain it.
Yeah.
They would just bail at the last minute because that's when they started thinking about their future goals, and that's not where they wanted to be.
Got it.
Right? So a big mistake of mine is not understanding those future goals prior to all of that happening.
Yeah.
Definitely not my fault. Could I have maybe swayed them in one way or another early on? I mean, I guess if I could see the future, because everything was like very focused and, you know, they're very excited and very happy going forward, and then they changed their mind at the last minute, which I totally didn't understand. So trying to figure out how to mitigate that and limit that. I've had that on residential, and I've had that on commercial stuff.
Okay.
And it's super crazy. I don't understand.
Yeah, so it's like you almost change your process. You focus now, which is extremely important. You want to make sure that you're figuring out what people want, what their desires are, what their goals are, because otherwise in the end, it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, right? You put in all this work, you've gotten everything done, you've almost like signed everything on the dotted line, and then somebody goes, you know what, this is actually not what I want. I didn't think of it from this perspective. And who knows what happened in their life to make them think about it this way now. But it's like you now protect yourself by making sure that you get all this stuff hammered out, and maybe there's some process that you do to make sure that you get these questions answered, and now you can make sure that the end result is going to be exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah, just not. It's more than a couple of questions. Like, hey, is this the end result you want? Or 5 years down the road, do we know where the market's going to be? Are you going to be happy here? And they kind of touch on it and they think about it for a little bit, but definitely, in some cases, have to dig a little bit deeper just to make sure that we get to the finish line.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the very beginning.
Yeah.
When I talk to these people, I'm like, hey, this is what it's going to take to get to the finish line. This
Yeah.
is how I see things going during the transaction. And then here's your product. And then after the transaction, you have to make sure that this is where you want to be and these are the numbers you're going to hit.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to grow with
and
everything, right? So.
And that's like a huge part of like client relationship, right? It's always listening with 2 ears, speaking with one mouth. You really need to hear what people want, and you need to dive into what they want. And it really comes down to getting to know your client, knowing their desires, and asking the right questions, right? The quality of your questions will typically determine the quality of the deal. So if you're making sure that you get everything down and you're on the same page, then there's going to be no questions at the end. Everyone's going for the same end goal, and everything will go smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
It's tough to see the future, and you have to be a detective.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just have to do the best you can.
Yeah.
Because my business is 90% of it's referrals.
Yeah.
So I want to do a good job for everybody.
So let's talk about the last thing I like to discuss is, a lot of times in your career or in your life, right, it might be some sort of mistake that occurred that allowed you to go one direction over the other, right? Like, because you ended up going from being a general contractor to being a commercial real estate broker, right? Like, what did something happen in that time, or like, how did you end up from Colorado to California, right? I don't believe it's the successes that we've had, but it's typically the mistakes or something that our life, maybe a major event that ended up leading us to where we are today. So what event or what things happened to you that allowed you to get to your end goal where you are now, happy in California with your family, commercial real estate broker?
Yeah, and it's tough to call them mistakes. It's kind of just decisions I made.
Yeah.
I'm very happy where I'm at right now. Life-changing events. It was the crash, 2008 crash.
Yeah.
I was definitely going to stay in Colorado, but I happened to have met my wife right when that was going down.
Yeah.
My now wife. And my projects were done. I had properties that I had tenants in. And I'm like, okay, what's my next move here? I'm like, okay, I'm going to move out to California and I'm going to chase the foreclosure market.
Yeah.
So I came out here, did a couple of things, and then I'm like, I'm going to get my general contractor's license and I'm going to get in with these property preservation companies. Exhausting.
Yeah.
Very risky because I was out. These banks, they wanted to give you, a 15% draw, and then, you could collect like another 15% when the job was done, but then they could.
What does
wait.
a 15% draw mean?
It's 50% on the total contract.
Okay.
Right? In California, you can only have $1,000 or 10%, whichever is less, to start your job. So I'd always get that, and then they would give me a draw after that of 15%.
So you have to put up all the money to get these
I had to
jobs?
put up all the money on these jobs.
That's crazy. And
so like 30% I would get paid on, and the rest of it I had to dish out, and then they could wait 45 days before the check was cut to pay me legally. So they would always wait till the last second. So
of course.
I'm like,
yeah, so your accounts receivable were probably through the roof most of the time, just having to make this stuff go down. Did you end up having to hire like a company to go handle getting that money, or were you?
It was the banks. I got paid every time, but it was like super stressful because I would literally have on my calendar job numbers on the calendar and be like, and I would call them, hey, have you cut that check? And usually the check was cut early, and I would get that. But
let me ask you another question too. When it comes to dealing with a bank, I'm assuming it's a lot of bureaucracy, right? Like you can't just get a decision made immediately. That's probably why they didn't pay you soon. It's probably they had to go through 7 people just to get anything done. Is that something that you experienced?
Absolutely. And then everything I did with the banks at the time was all photo documented. So I had to send this stuff in through their internal system, and then they would go through it. Like the front person would be like, okay, it's good. And it would go off to the next person. And they would go through it and be like, okay, we can pay him for this, not this, and this, because they'd have to go with the bid. what was done, what wasn't done, and then you go through 3 or 4 people looking at all that stuff, and in some cases they'll be like, I can't justify that you put a new roof on the property. Like, here's an invoice, here's a material list. They're like, that could be for anything. And I'm like, here's photos. Well, you didn't get the back side of it. We don't see any flashing on the chimney. And I'm like, they cut my stuff. And that's kind of why I got out of it. Because, I was a pretty honest guy.
Yeah, it was too much of a bureaucracy.
It was unbelievable. So, and they could just people, it was their part-time job, I felt like. And they're like, nah, we're not going to pay you on that just because I don't understand what you did and I don't think it was done right.
Yeah, how would you end up collecting on that?
You have no idea what the deal is. It's like, it was a super nightmare in some cases. That was the hardest part. Yeah. For sure, that was the hardest part.
It's like, you contracted me to do this job. I wonder if, like, on the other end, if there's a way, of course it's too late now, if you could have just like been like, hey, these are the things we're going to fix. Do you approve all this, right? Or would that have slowed down the process too much because you're dealing with 100 homes?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I did. But I did it on a short form on a bid, and I'd send it to them. And somebody would print it out and be like, no, we're going to reduce this. This is what industry standard is for that. And I would have to justify the difference. So, I mean, it would be 30, 60 days after my first initial send off of the bid before I would get, an okay to go. And then the okay would be this amount. And then I'd look at my bid, like, that's 20% less.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not doing any of these things. And we'd go back and forth. It was, in the beginning, it was great because they would just say, okay, because I had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah.
Once they started getting their rhythm and properties got sold and, they had enough people to deal because 50 people dealing with 1 million properties. It's like, it's going to take a long time to get through that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Right? That's crazy. I mean, it's interesting how that led you down your road towards commercial property, right? And also it even led you down the road of getting into Mercy Warehouse and with Lyft, right? Because you had no idea. You saw all the homeless. You dealt with a lot of people that were struggling, right? And they're just trying to find a place to live. And you're like, how can I help out and how can I give back to these people?
Yeah, and they didn't have a way to reach out. And I asked them, and they're like, yeah, we'd love help. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see what I can do. And
I'm
like, wow, I can't do anything.
Yeah,
I had 50 phone calls and nobody would ever call me back.
Yeah.
I'm like, I guess because the problem's so huge. There's so many people that need help.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Very cool, my friend.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to leave the guests with, some last thoughts about commercial real estate if they're looking to invest, just things that they should think about, or is there anything else just that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's interested in investing, they just need to make sure that they have their team in place before they start spending money. Make sure they cross the T's and dot the I's. Mm-hmm. Make sure it's something that, makes sense for them. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And there's, if you need help, find your local commercial real estate agent, to guide you if you need guidance. If you're a savvy business owner, you know what you want to do, totally different story, right? And they need maybe guidance in a different way. Or maybe they don't need guidance and they just want somebody to help them out with contracts and things like that too. So, everybody's a little bit different.
And most commercial real estate brokers, they don't charge for consultations, right? So you could just give a call and you could have a discussion. Yeah,
no, I don't know anybody who charges a consultation. We typically get paid when the deal closes. Mm. So that's a risk we're taking. That's why we have to be careful and vet our clients. And, people get offended when I ask what their credit score is and if they're qualified for this type of deal. But I mean, I have to do that because I don't work for free.
No, of course, 100%. Right. And then can I ask too, I know you work for RE/MAX. Is there a reason you chose RE/MAX over other companies, maybe let's say Keller Williams or something along those lines? Yeah, I mean, RE/MAX they have the biggest global brand by far. I think Pacific Sotheby's is in, I don't know, it's either 40 or 60 some odd countries. Is Pacific Sotheby's the parent company?
Pacific Sotheby's is their own company.
Got it. Okay, it's their own company.
So it's a different company that I work with, but they're our second leading in countries.
Okay.
RE/MAX is in over 115 countries.
Okay, got it. It's a different company. Okay, I understand.
Totally different company. So I went with them because it has the global reach, and I do the commercial, but I also do residential. Mm-hmm. Living in Orange County and all the development stuff I do, so I wanted the residential reach as well.
Yeah.
And if you go to these big brand commercial specific companies, they don't do anything residential. So I didn't want to take that off the table because I like that. So it was an obvious choice for me to go with RE/MAX because they're the biggest. They have tons of killer technology to help me network with other agents in other states. If I have a product or if they're looking for a product and they're looking for a buyer, we can go back and forth just because we're connected under the RE/MAX umbrella. So totally cool.
Awesome.
Really cool.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask one other thing while I have you here. So can you explain triple net? I know sometimes we hear triple net when dealing with commercial properties. What does triple net mean, and how does that get calculated into your overall ROI on a property?
Yeah, so triple net is for like tenants coming in. So if I want to lease a property, if I'm working with a tenant and they want to get placed in a building and it says it's triple net, call for specifics. So let's say a building is a triple net and right next door is not a triple net, but it's an identical building. So the non-triple net will be, let's just throw out the $9,000 a month for your rent.
Okay.
The triple net will be $4,000 a month.
Okay.
But you're going to pay the taxes, you're going to pay the insurance, and you're going to pay for maintenance on the property.
Got it.
So they add those in, so the numbers are going to be about the
That
same.
was taxes, maintenance, and insurance.
Yeah.
Got
It's
it.
basically the expensive on the property.
Got it. So you're saying that almost the person renting it, they would be responsible for a lot of the stuff that you'd be responsible for as a property owner when you're renting it out to them. So what would be the benefit of renting a place with triple net versus not?
I'm a fan of not, because taxes go up, your rent's going to go up.
Yeah.
And that's built into your lease. So when taxes go up, your rent goes up. But when you're in a non-triple net, taxes go up, your lease stays the same until the end of your lease, and then you negotiate a new lease, that type of thing. So maybe taxes go down, probably not, maybe maintenance. It's just a different way to write the lease to cover the owner, so they don't have to stomach the increases in insurance costs. Or if it needs a new roof, then everybody pays $100 a month for the next 2 years, and then that goes towards the new roof type of thing. So the owner doesn't have to take it out of, what do you call your profits, it's just a different way of writing a lease.
Okay, got it. And it's kind of like up to you whether you think it's more beneficial or not. Like if you think it's going to be a lot of maintenance or repairs, or if it's not, it might be beneficial for you to do without triple net.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times you don't have a choice because the building you want is triple net, and that's just how it is. And there are a lot of them out there.
Got it.
I think they're a little bit more expensive, and there's a little bit more room for the owner to increase your rent.
But you're saying most of them, you don't even get this option. You're just going to have to pay the triple net price.
Right.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So Michael, what I would like you to do now is if you can tell our guests how they can get in contact with you if they ever need help with any commercial real estate issues or problems or any real estate issues, they can call you. So if you can give them your name, phone number, your website, so they can reach you anytime.
Okay, that's fantastic. I appreciate it. Yeah, Michael Taylor, RE/MAX Commercial. I'm with RE/MAX Terrasol out of Dana Point. You can go to michaeltaylorrealty.com and 949-363-3141.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. If anybody out there is looking to invest in any sort of commercial real estate or get help with any commercial real estate issues, you can reach Michael at the contact information that he just provided. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your time. Thank you. And
Thank you,
goodbye.
Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you.